Fight Mike here. Today we're going to be going through the newest fight announcements that have been released over the last few days, mainly from the UFC 319 card that's going to be in Chicago and one on the UFC 317 card. Jumping in with the first matchup on the screen, King Green or Bobby Green versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. I'm not sure why the UFC have made this fight. I feel like there was much better fights that they could have made, and this is such a ridiculously expensive matchup since these guys have been in the UFC for literally forever. I think King Green's been in the UFC since 2010 or 2011, and Carlos Diego Ferreira since like 2012, 2013. So these guys are both getting paid like $200K to fight each other, and no one's interested in it. They've both got a decent name, but there's no like name passing ability in this fight. Whereas if you see like, if we could have given these guys anyone who's like on the come up in the lightweight division, then we get to build the name off of them. Like the Mauricio Ruffy with King Green, we got to build Mauricio's name with Bobby. So I don't know why they've done this. There's going to be no one's name who's become bigger after this fight. Like if we see Diego Ferreira brutally knock out King Green, we won't think anything of it. It happened literally in March. So, and if we see King Green sleep Diego Ferreira, it's like, yeah, Diego is literally 40 years old. So I don't know why they've made this matchup. They could have made two good matchups to build two new prospects and save so much money and have two fights on a card. Like, why give Carlos a rewarding matchup when he fights literally once a year? And he's 40 years old. He's going to be around for another 2 years max. And I'm sure it's going to be a fun fight, but no one was screaming for a fast turnaround for Bobby Green after UFC 313. No one sees someone get flatline KO'd and then says, oh, we need to see him versus Carlos Diego Ferreira in 5-6 months after that. Like, save the body and save the brain damage for an actual consequential matchup. Don't just let them Chiesa their way through the UFC, if you know what I mean. Like, there's no reason to just give these guys easy matchups to keep them around. They're not worth that much to the UFC. I'll be picking Carlos Diego Ferreira by however he wants. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got Chase Hooper versus Alexander Hernandez. Another matchup that no one was asking for. I thought that Chase Hooper's initial call out of Fares Ziam was probably the best that we could get for Chase. But why are we making this? Chase has been beating these guys who are over the hill. We wanted him versing a prime opponent. And you can pretend, hey, Alexander Hernandez isn't that old. He's like 32. But like, he's not like a prime opponent that I can see being very different to when he's like 35. He's not the most technical. There's just nothing prime about him. Whereas if he got the Fares Ziam fight, Fares is on like a 5-fight winning streak. So it makes a lot of sense to build Chase's name off that. Whereas Alexander Hernandez, anyone who's been following his career over the last like 5 years, knows that he was a good prospect at one point, but now we know the level that he's at. So if Chase Hooper beats him, it's not like he's that much better than beating a guy like Jim Miller, who he just beat. So I feel like we could have done that for Fares Ziam fight, where if he won, we're like, oh my god, he deserves a ranked matchup 100%. So this is sort of like a non-consequential matchup that's sort of thrown on the card to just beef it up a little bit. And that's the thing, like, I also sort of see Alexander Hernandez as like a less impressive Jake Matthews. And most of the time, Jake's not that impressive. So it's not like we're getting a win over a guy with like a really specialist ability. Like, we're not seeing Chase Hooper versus like an extremely good striker or an extremely good grappler. He's just an all-round decent fighter. So this is sort of like an Apex main card type fight. And I think Chase Hooper will be able to beat Alexander Hernandez just due to having a deeper tool bag in this fight. Moving on to the next one, we've got GM3 versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. I like this fight a lot more than I like the others. I think since becoming a fighting nerd, Mikhail will put on better performances. He looked better last time out in his fight against Cedric Dumas, but in saying that, that doesn't mean much at all. But this is the type of fight I like seeing Gerald in. I didn't like the Brad Tavares fight because there's no chance he's going to meershot him and get him out in the third round just because Brad Tavares has iron takedown defense. So Gerald meershot was never going to take that. But this fight against Mikhail, I can definitely see Mikhail's beating him for the first 2 rounds and then Gerald pulling off the meershot in the third round. So I'm really hyped for this fight. You only put meershot against these types of opponents that he can somehow beat them in the last round. And I think Mikel's sort of the opponent with some questionable fight IQ, especially against Kevin Holland, where he got armbarred. He cannot be just hanging around on the ground like that against Gerald, because Gerald will be able to finish him in this fight. But I still think that Mikel will win. Really fun fight though. Happy it's been added to the card. Hopefully it's on the prelims, not a main. It's not a main card. Not paying for this fight. That's not what we want. But moving on to the next fight, we've got Edson Barboza versus Drakkar Klose. I don't really care about this fight either. Like, I know I'm just shitting on all these fights, but like, why do we need to see Barboza back up at lightweight? We just saw him lose to Sadiq Youssef and Lerone Murphy at featherweight. Like, that's not a sign that we need to see him back up at lightweight. The story's not finished yet. Like, why? I get that that Drakkar Klose was just on a 4-fight winning streak and did the UFC sort of a solid by facing Joel Alvarez, but both these guys are over 35. Drakkar's about 37. I think Barboza's between 39 and 40. So it's like, what are we getting out of this fight? If a Barboza beats Drakkar Klose, then everyone's just going to say Drakkar was never good. But then if Drakkar beats Barboza, then people are just going to say that Barboza's 40. So why make this fight? Like, we could have got a Manuel Torres fight against either of them. Well, we could have got, again, Fares Ziem. I keep talking about him. But he's a much better opponent for an Edson Barboza to make the name off him. But like, or even Chase Hooper. Like, put Chase Hooper against one of these guys. Like, these guys are pretty high-rated, unranked lightweights or featherweights for Edson. Put Chase against him. Yeah, like, I don't understand this matchmaking, but I'll probably be picking Drakkar Klose for this one. I don't think that Edson's going to have the same speed that he had a couple of years ago. And if it was 3 years ago, I'm picking him to smoke Drakkar. But it's not the world that we're in. So moving on to the last matchup I wanted to break down for today. It's Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima. I was literally just talking about Felipe Lima in my top 10 best prospects in the UFC. If you haven't seen that video, I would check it out. There's a bunch of good fighters on there, good prospects that you might want to keep an eye out for. But I really like this fight. I think Felipe Lima is a dark horse in that bantamweight division. I think he's going to be a really difficult fight for Peyton Talbot. But people are putting this like Felipe Lima is going to absolutely destroy Peyton Talbot, which is definitely not the case. Like, this is going to be a much closer fight than people think. I sometimes don't like these matchups when two prospects are put up against each other, but I like that these guys are put up against each other just because they've both had a few fights in the UFC already. So we already know that these guys are pretty good, and they've fought some decent opponents, got some decent wins. So it's nice to see these guys put together against each other to see who's going to be the ranked fighter in the future. I think this is a very winnable fight for Talbot, even though he's not, I think, as good of a prospect as Felipe Lima. I think it's definitely still winnable. I think Talbot at this point in his career is probably going to be a little bit more of a clean fighter than Felipe Lima. Felipe is a bit more crazy. He's got a similar style to the shooter box style, and I could see a striker like Talbot being able to catch him out like that. And especially since Lima has fought guys like Miles Johns and Muhammad Naimov before, who, although they're decent fighters, they're not a sharp, slick striker like Peyton Talbot. I think Peyton would be levels ahead of Miles Johns, and I could see him like brutally KOing Miles Johns on the feet. But in this fight, it's going to be really close. We'll see Peyton's new and improved takedown defense. I'm sure after the Howdy Barcelos fight, he's gone and worked on that. And Felipe Lima will test that. He likes being on the ground. He likes to jump on submissions. And I still think that Felipe Lima will take this via a close decision. That's all the matchups for today. Let me know what you think of them in the comments section below. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.